This is your reality check.
Welcome to The Reality Check, the weekly Canadian show that explores a wide range of controversies and curiosities using science and critical thinking. Today is May 7th, 2021, and I'm producer Pat. We have three interesting segments for you this week. Cristina looks into the notion of a soulmate and does some math around the chances of finding yours. Darren examines the idea that turtles are slow. A quick note about that segment. At the end, there is a discussion about the video Darren references, but I cut out the part where they actually watched the video. But first, Adam talks to us about his woes with produce bags. I should mention that the tip he offers regarding using friction also works great with dog poop bags and has been a game changer for me. And with that, I hope everyone out there is staying safe and healthy, and we will talk to you soon.
What's up, cuboids? I recently saw a sort of meme which mentioned the frustration people had with not being able to lick their fingers when opening a produce bag. This is in the context of the pandemic. Now, I don't lick my fingers to open bags or turn pages in a book, but this sent me down a bit of a rabbit hole, which made some sense of my recent inability to open these bags. Now, produce bags, for those of us who remember what it's like to shop in a grocery store, are these very thin, transparent single-use bags which you use to put fruit or vegetables in. Without knowing the reason why, I've had a hell of a hard time opening these lately. So I moved around a bit in the past year, and something I noticed around the fall was that I couldn't open the produce bags at the new grocery store I'd been shopping at. I figured these were just cheaper bags than the ones I'd been used to, some sort of different product, and I'd sit there in the middle of the grocery store struggling with these godforsaken bags, sometimes for a minute or two at a time, just to be able to buy like a cucumber or something like that. So when I moved again, I went back to the IGA I'd been shopping at before, and I was still having a really hard time with these stupid bags, so I didn't really know what was going on. Were there new bags that they were bringing out? And I thought that maybe this was because I wasn't wearing my glasses in the store because of my mask. So when I started wearing the mask, the glasses would fog up, but I was still wearing them, and now I wasn't wearing them at all in stores anymore. But this licking fingers thing made me think maybe it had something to do with dry fingers. The first thing we do when we walk into a grocery store is wash our hands with hand sanitizer, or at least that's what a lot of us should be doing. This cleans your hands, removes grease, and dries your fingers. First stop, the produce area. So what's the deal with this finger-licking idea? It's probably not a bright idea in the midst of a global pandemic. Even if surface contact is not as considerable a vector of transmission as we thought it was last year, it's still a way to get sick. So was this really what was going on? I wasn't really sure, so I poked around the internet, or as it's known on the reality check, doing research. Now, these plastic bags stick together when you try to open them. Sometimes static electricity is the culprit, which can cause the two sides of the bag to stick together and make them difficult to open. If your hands are moist, they seem to stick to the bag, allowing a person to open them. This is similar to turning the pages of a book or a magazine. So some people will lick their fingers to turn the pages of a book. It's not a habit that I have personally ever done. So what's the mechanism here? If there's water on the floor, you slip. So why would it help you stick better to things like a bag or turning a page? A post on Quora suggests a few ideas, and that this idea is still being researched. There's increased friction from moistened fingers, but that doesn't really tell us why. One idea is that the dead skin cells, the topmost layer of your skin, swells and softens, so this allows your fingers to conform to the surface that it's in contact with. One writer suggests it's similar to a sponge, so a dry sponge will slide easily across a flat surface, and a wet sponge will stick, so it'll kind of hit those little crevices and stuff. Your fingers, like the sponge, have a more effective contact when they're wet. Microscopic grooves in the surface are matched by your fingers. Another article on The Naked Scientist expanded on this idea, suggesting that this thin layer of water prevents air from getting between your fingers and a page, or in this case, between your finger and the bag, so that there's a partial vacuum created, allowing the fingers to act as a sort of mini suction cup. Now, years ago, Elon did a segment on how wet fingers cause wrinkles, and that those wrinkled fingers will allow us to have a better grip on a wet object. So the idea here is that it might have been an adaptation to allow us to walk on wet rocks or grip things with our hands when they're wet. One thing worth considering is that older people generally have drier skin on their fingers. So I have vague memory of older relatives licking their fingers to turn pages in magazines, but this isn't something I see young people do. So is this a learned behavior? It seems more likely that this is done later in life because of necessity, rather than some sort of generational thing that's learned. I wonder also if this impulse is something I'll be inclined to do when I get older. There may be other things to consider here. The thickness and some other qualities of the paper may affect their likelihood to stick together. So it seems feasible to me that older people who have spent more decades around certain cheaper types of newspaper or magazine papers may have different experiences than younger generations who don't need to lick their finger to scroll through their iPads. All of this brings us back to the challenge at hand. We clean and dry our hands with hand sanitizer, leaving them dry both for the short and long term. So it's dry because you just did it, and also our hands are dry in general if we're using a lot of hand sanitizer throughout the day. So what's a consumer to do in the produce section? Now, I've seen some creative suggestions when finger licking is less than advisable. Some people suggest making use of the misting machines in the produce area. So basically, some vegetables have these sort of perforated hoses or sprinklers which spray a light mist over them. You could just stick your hand under these and quickly hydrate them, and then you could use those to open bags. On my last visit to the grocery store, I didn't see any of these running. I think it depends on the store and what type of setup there is, but they often only have an intermittent spray. So if they don't happen to be spraying, you can't really do anything about that. Now, this method of hydration can work for books and magazines as well. So rather than licking one's finger, a person can touch a moist rag or a sponge instead, and people do this. This doesn't have an identical effect to licking one's fingers, but the general principle is similar, and it is a bit more hygienic. Finally, I saw a few suggested methods of opening these bags. Aside from having dry fingers, I specifically have bad fine motor skills. I struggled with some things like handwriting, shoe tying, and other coordination problems when I was a child. Many of these problems still plague me as an adult, especially now that I have the responsibility of dressing and caring for a 2- and 4-year-old, as well as myself, obviously. So much to say, I have a lot of trouble with these little bags. One simple trick is to rub the bag in your fingers quickly, like that universal gesture meaning money. So the friction between your fingers and the bag should be higher than the bag to the bag, which allows it to separate more easily. I tried this in the store this week and it worked quite well. I also had some trouble opening a garbage bag this week. It's another common challenge for me, and I used this technique and it worked pretty well. So I think I'm going to apply this to many facets of my life. Now, it's funny that the thing looks like the gesture for money, as the origin of that gesture has a similar purpose. So rubbing bills together allows you to separate the bills that stick to each other. So that's where that idea of rubbing your fingers to mean money comes from. Rubbing your palms together with the bags between your hands works with the same principle, but it's probably not necessary if you can manage to open bags with just your fingers. There are also other techniques such as cupping your hands and slapping the bag, but this really seems like a bad choice to do in a crowded grocery store. You might look a little weird. Some of these techniques don't really apply to pages of a book or magazine. I suppose if you have 2 pages that are stuck together, you could rub them a bit to open them, but you'll need to be very careful not to damage the corners of the pages. And if you're just taking sort of the top page up, you can't really use that technique at all. If you're having trouble opening produce bags, you're not alone. Before you suspect your failing eyesight, cheaper bags, or some other complex explanation, consider the pandemic and your dry, possibly aging fingers as being the culprit. A simple trick like rubbing the bag with your fingers may be all that's needed to avoid a few frustrating minutes in the produce aisle while other customers are impatiently social distancing from you and the cucumbers that you're blocking.
I know what you're thinking, checkers. Science is not a word you typically see referring to the term soulmate, but this is the reality check after all, so let's give it a go. I was inspired to cover this thanks to the hilarious Ellen Marsh, co-host on one of my guilty pleasure podcasts, Obsessed with Disappeared. Now, OWD is a true crime / comedy podcast that Ellen co-hosts with her BFF Patrick Hines, where they recap episodes of ID's Disappeared. Now, Ellen gets especially irritated when the term soulmate comes up, and it comes up a lot on that show. It's used to describe a couple in the documentary. She has gone on more than one rant that while you can be very compatible with someone, the notion of a soulmate is BS and problematic. So naturally, I wondered, has anyone ever applied science to soulmates? So what do we mean by a soulmate? Now, it depends on who you talk to. Soulmate is a generic term that typically refers to a romantic or platonic partner with whom you deeply connect with. Now, more commonly, the term refers to that one person in the world that you're meant to live happily ever after with. The notion, especially in New Age circles, often implies cosmic destiny, that there is this one human on Earth or in the universe that you're meant to be with, a human you will one day serendipitously run into at a Bloomingdale's in New York City when your hands touch after both reaching for the same pair of black gloves to purchase, which is, by the way, the setup in the romantic comedy Serendipity. Now, you know that when we locked eyes across the room, I knew they were the one thing, or the you complete me type stuff. It's hackneyed Hollywood rom-com tropes that I admittedly bought into when I was younger. The term soulmate dates back to 1822, where it's said to first appear in romantic literature by English poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge. But a precursor of this notion dates back even further to Greek philosopher days, which I found really interesting. An academic paper I came across from Dr. Nathan Ofer cites a quotation from Aristotle defining a true friend with a word that translates to my soul's half, or one soul dwelling in two bodies. Now let's get the is there such a thing as a soul out of the way, as it's not my focus, but it is referenced in articles I cite, so I feel compelled to address it. A Bustle article by Gina Florio called Scientific Proof That Soulmates Don't Exist cites that 64% of Americans believe that humans have a soul that survives our physical bodies when we die. That's actually down from 69% from previous years. And unfortunately, I couldn't really find a reliable recent poll of Canadians, or I'd be citing it right now.
That's still a lot, though.
It is a lot.
Yeah.
In general, from the stats that I saw, there are less people that believe in a higher power in Canada and also in Europe. But anyways, that's specific to belief in a soul. Although it's not something scientists tend to discuss publicly too much because it is a sensitive topic, the consensus based on studies in a range of disciplines, from neuroscience to psychology, is that souls don't exist. Biologist Francis Crick, who co-discovered the structure of the DNA molecule, refers to that sense of identity that we all have as just, quote, a vast assembly of nerve cells and their associated molecules. Florio references a cognitive scientist and Rutgers University professor named Julian Mussolino, who authored The Soul Fallacy, What Science Shows We Gain from Letting Go of Our Soul Beliefs. Now, he says we can still hold on to morals and ethics if we abandon the idea of the soul. He adds we'd actually be further ahead as a society since our obsession with the soul clouds our judgment when it comes to hot-button topics like the criminal justice system and abortion. As Florio also points out, this belief in a soul match can really hinder romantic relationships as well. It is incredibly unrealistic to think that there's one person out there in the world that we're destined to be with. And studies show it can hurt a relationship to think of a partner as a soulmate. It's almost like they're infallible in a way, right? Relationship psychologist Dr. Karen Anderson Abral told Women's Health that the concept also implies you're not whole without someone else. And that's pretty messed up. Not to mention, what happens when the person we believe to be the one dumps us, or worse, dies? To hold on to a belief that we may never again find a true love or companion is very, very unhealthy, to say the least. Quickly, there's also this to consider. Monogamy remains an exception to the rule among mammals, and studies show social monogamy in male mammals is pretty uncommon. In an interview with CNN, Tim Gluttenbrock, a professor of evolutionary biology at the University of Cambridge, says although we shouldn't draw any definitive conclusions about humans and monogamy, quote, the ancestral condition for humans is probably polygamy. So evolutionarily speaking, it isn't likely that there exists only one human who can be our one and only. Okay, now that that's out of the way, moving on to the fun stuff, math. Grade 11 me would be shocked to hear me say that. Dr. Sabrina Stierwalt did an episode on the Everyday Einstein podcast on the likelihood of finding your soulmate, along with a written piece called The Science of Soulmates. In short, statistically, it would be nearly impossible to meet your soulmate. As she points out, quote, while it may be impossible to define a soulmate in testable scientific terms, we can take a look at some cold, hard math to determine how likely we are to meet one particular destined to be mine person on this planet full of people. Many of you, like Darren and Adam especially, are fans of the popular webcomic XKCD. Now, the author of that comic is former NASA engineer Randall Munroe, who wrote a book called What If? Serious Scientific Answers to Absurd Hypothetical Questions. That sounds fun. I think I'm going to look into that book. Now, he drops some logic on the topic, which Stierwalt summarizes. First off, out of the 100 billion or so people that have walked this earth, less than 10% are still alive today. If we assume our soulmate could have lived during any time period, then for more than 90% of us, our soulmates are already dead. Bummer. And this gets worse, as you can imagine, if we have to factor in future, as of yet non-existent people as potential soulmates. End quote. Okay, so Munroe makes an assumption that your soulmate would have to be alive and likely in a similar age range, which then narrows the list from 7.5 billion or so to around 500 million people. Now, let's say, obviously during our pre-pandemic existence, that we make eye contact with around 30 to 40 strangers each day, going about our daily lives. Stierwalt suggests even 15 people a day is a generous guess. So let's say 10% of the people we encounter in our daily life are in our age range or who we may consider soulmate material. If you live 80 years, that's around 50,000 people we can consider prospective soulmates. But if you remember, we are looking for one person out of around 500 million people. If you lock eyes with 50,000 of them, that's 0.01%. As Munroe concludes, if you lived 10,000 lifetimes, you would only find your one true soulmate once. In short, the odds are just not in your favor here. One last thing I'd like to consider is the proximity principle. And Ellen talks about this on the Obsessed with Disappeared podcast. In social psychology, the proximity principle accounts for individuals' tendency to form interpersonal relationships with those that are closest to them. Makes sense, right, Pat? Mm-hmm. American social psychologist Theodore Newcomb first documented the effects of proximity on acquaintance and attraction. Now, his studies demonstrated how people who interact and live in proximity will be more likely to develop a relationship. There are a couple of reasons attributed to that. Humans like things that are familiar to them, and the more often people come into contact with each other, the more chances we have of cultivating a relationship. So, I hope I haven't been an absolute killjoy today. Just because I don't subscribe to the notion of a soulmate the same way others may think of it, I do believe that there are people you meet in life that you connect with more profoundly than others. But there just is nothing mystical about that. And just because it isn't mystical, it doesn't make it any less wonderful when you find your producer, Pat.
Oh, that's very nice.
Hi everyone, I'm going to talk to you today about whether turtles are slow. From early childhood, the world has taught me that turtles are slow. Children's books and societal references abound about their slowness, aside from the Teenage Mutant Ninja variety. How are you going to have a ninja that only moves slowly? You wouldn't, and Splinter wouldn't have taught that, so why do you keep bringing it up?
Well, he's a rat and he's fast, so it's an unattainable goal. You know?
He's fast for a rat, maybe, but not compared to a human in a race. Anyway, turtles are slow, right? I thought this was true until I saw a video of a pretty fast-moving turtle on land. Let's explore the broader context of turtle slowness and then examine some speeds. Blue Planet Aquarium has a seemingly relevant article titled, Turtles, Myth About Its Slowness. Perhaps one is supposed to read that with a colon after the word turtles in mind? Anyway, the opening paragraph of this 2017 article is worth citing in full. Quote, many do not know why, but they have cooked up stories about these poor animals. Just like they have woven so much mystery around the tortoise and much eye-popping folklore, making you wonder if such an animal could have committed all the atrocities leveled against it by humans.
Wow.
However, we are going to open your eyes, maybe it's towards, the real story about why turtles are slow in this write-up, end quote. That's intriguing.
Okay.
Well, now, isn't that a glimpse into the lives of others in various ways? Is there a lot of anti-turtle and anti-tortoise propaganda out there? I know the internet is a harsh place for humans, but turtles too? Well, maybe Donatello could work up some filter so they could avoid the worst of it.
Oh, yeah, he's pretty smart.
The article provides reasons for why turtles are slow. These are primarily evolutionary or biological. Turtles are herbivores, so they are eating stationary things. They don't have to chase them down. They aren't chasing prey in general, so they don't have to move quickly. You may say, but many prey move quickly. In fact, that's what we probably often think of in the wild, a gazelle or a deer running from a cheetah or a wolf.
Or a hare.
There you go. The turtle chose a different path. Armor. Their hard and thick shells provide protection from a range of predators, so they don't really have to outrun anything that is trying to eat them.
Sure.
Of course, they didn't choose anything. That's an evolutionary shorthand. See the free will discussion. But you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So this sounds generally true, although in the next sentence, Blue Planet says turtles might want to be wary of fast movement lest they have a fall, which would cause bruising, sprains, or a cracking shell.
Oh. Yeah.
Perhaps I was thinking, does this make sense? Can you have both these things? Is this contradictory? Maybe the best way to reconcile this is thinking of how good medieval armor would offer protection in some fights, but you wouldn't jog around in it. It would just be not a good idea, and maybe you'll trip and fall, which could then injure you.
Just don't wear medieval armor, right?
It's going to hurt my gains, bro. Now, another paragraph I want to quote in full is, one of the reasons why turtles are slow is due to their slow metabolism. Yes, their rate of metabolism is slow, and the rate of metabolism goes a long way to determining speed. Sure. You may think their slowness and low metabolism are limitations, but will it interest you, oh human, to also know that they are among the longest living creatures on Earth?
Again, contrasted to a rabbit who has a relatively short life and a high metabolism, right?
While it is true that turtles can live a long time, up to centuries, and they are correct that a faster heart rate correlates with short lifespans, I'm starting to wonder if whoever wrote this had a turtle for a grandfather and they're taking things personally. Really, is this much turtle negativity in the world? All right, so this has hopefully been interesting so far, but I want to know if turtles are fast, not why they're slow.
Yeah.
Happily, I found an article by Brock Yates on allturtles.com that examined this exactly. Here's what he says. Quote, leatherback sea turtles have been reported to reach speeds of 35 kilometers an hour.
Wow. Falling?
Thrown. That's 22 miles an hour. Similarly, even turtles commonly kept as pets are quite swift when in water, as they are strong swimmers. Now, that leatherback number, that was in water, all right? It makes sense that turtles would be strong swimmers, at least some of them. And I was also just reminded of a wonderful life memory swimming alongside a turtle in Hawaii. It wasn't one of these prearranged things. I just happened to be at a beach, saw a turtle, swam along with it for a while.
Cool.
Wonderful. I was able to keep pace. It wasn't moving that quickly. But what about turtles on land? Are they fast or slow? Well, Mr. Yates says soft-shell turtles can move at speeds of 3 miles an hour on land. That's about 5 kilometers an hour. He says, quote, examples of soft-shell turtles include the Florida soft-shell turtle, the smooth soft-shell turtle, and the spiny soft-shell turtle. I think that's from Mario Kart. And that YouTube has many videos showing their speeds. I found one on Reddit that is similar to the one Yates links to, and both times it looks like the turtle's moving faster than 5 kilometers an hour. They come upon, I guess it's a soft-shell turtle. Looks like a normal turtle to me. It's very slowly moving, kind of checking out the scene. As you get closer, it gets a little freaked out, and it scurries down a hill towards the water.
Wow,
and it moves pretty quickly. As you know, podcast is a great visual medium, so you'll have to imagine that turtle moving fast, listeners. Now, how did I think this looks faster than 5 kilometers an hour? Well, in case you're wondering, it's not because I have any skill judging speeds like that, but I looked at a comparison to the average walking pace for a person, and a normal walking speed for a human is about 5 kilometers an hour. And I thought, that turtle looks like it's moving faster than that.
Sure. Well, there's scale, there's a bunch, there's issues.
And it was technically downhill, but, it didn't say whether turtles have to go uphill at a fast speed or not.
Drop it off your balcony and say move pretty damn fast.
Self-propelled movement, I think. So, in conclusion, while many turtles are slow, this isn't true for all turtles and not all of the time. Hashtag not all turtles. Now, I'm not saying a soft-shell turtle could actually beat a bunny, but it might give Shredder a surprise if he continues to believe the myth that turtles are always slow on land.
Okay, so some thoughts. I have had a pet turtle.
Oh.
And I have had 2 pet rabbits.
Personal experience.
So this is a painted turtle. Obviously, there's different kinds of turtles. It's a fairly small turtle. It was the size of a loonie. That's a coin here.
What color did you paint it?
He had red stripes like Raphael. His name was Tommy, though. Predated Power Rangers, so there's no relation to the Green Ranger.
For everyone who was asking.
Just in case. Just T-Turtle Tommy, that's why. Well, no, it's because even my family was like, oh, we named him after the guy from Power Rangers, right? I'm like, no. That timeline does not add up. Sorry, folks.
Don't try to retcon my turtle name.
Which is fine. I'm the Power Rangers fan in the family. So the turtle doesn't walk terribly fast, like, because the arms and legs, they stick out to the sides, right? Whereas like a cat or a dog, right, they move front to back. So it kind of scurries. Just it's kind of the shape of the shell and the way they stick out. It's more of an angle, but that's the general idea. But it's one of these, so we would take the turtle and we would just put him on the floor because he moves somewhat slow, but then you kind of look away for a second and, oh, where'd the turtle go? Well, he actually moved kind of fast, which is like in the story, right? You don't think he's going to move fast, so he moves faster than you expect. Rabbits are really fast, though, right?
Yes.
You let the rabbit out, and if you're trying to get him and he doesn't want you to catch him, it's like trying to catch a cat, right? He just jumps, he runs away, and you got to kind of corner him, and he'll get behind a piece of furniture, and it's a bit of a pain.
I wonder if it's even harder than catching a cat. You have all these animals, no?
Yeah. So rabbits can jump, yes, but they're not going to like jump up on a piece of furniture and get away.
They're not going to. Okay, they have less power.
So the problem with the problem with the rabbit for me was he would get behind the bookcase and stuff like that. It was a huge pain, and I'd be like, I need to get that rabbit out of there because he pees behind that bookcase. I got to move the bookcase, clean it up. It's going to be a huge pain.
Yeah.
So I had two rabbits, and they were both pretty fast. And in nature, you see it too, right? If you see a rabbit, they hop along very very quickly, fast metabolism. And
they
all
certainly
that
do,
stuff, right? And turtles are just chill. I feel like a person could run faster than that.
Well, the person could run faster than that, but do you think that's as faster than average walking speed of a person?
Maybe. It's hard to tell.
It's hard to tell. It is hard to tell.
But that's faster than I expect. It's faster than the painted turtle, obviously. And the soft shell may have to do with the mobility, right? I
assume so.
The harder shell,
yeah.
it's less mobility for the legs and things like that.
I agree.
Or it's the trade-off. If you have a harder shell, you don't need to move as fast, right?
That's true. Yeah, exactly.
So, interesting.
For show notes or to discuss this episode, visit our Facebook page and website at trcpodcast.com. For general inquiries or to send a topic or parody suggestion, email info@trcpodcast.com. Help support the show by leaving a review on iTunes and liking us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at TRC_podcast.
Outtakes.
Blue Planet Aquarium has a seemingly relevant... Let me try it again. Blue Planet Aquarium has a seemingly relevant article... Oh, wow. Blue Planet Aquarium has a seemingly relevant article called... Sorry, Pat. Blue Planet Aquarium has a seemingly relevant article called Turtles, Myths... Wow, this is my Vince Cerf moment. Turtles. Okay, so to be fair, it's called Turtles Myth About Its Slowness, which is an odd title.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a mouthful.